1 second, I need some coffee. This one tired me out, dog. Hey, what's happening? My name is D, and welcome back to another episode of Book Reviews with a Regular Dude. Today, we're going to talk about A Night and Its Moon by Piper C.J. I think this is another, book talk sensations book. I don't know that much about this author. I followed her for a week or two back in 2021. She was a friend of a friend. I'm no longer friends with that person, and I don't think they're friends either, so that's not even relevant information. Might cut it from the video. I know that she's a popular creator and stuff like that. She's written this whole quadrilogy and another book called The Deer and the Dragon, which I did a video on, and I think she's coming out with a middle grade book for some reason. But before we get into all of that, I got to give a quick shout out to my Plus Ultra Don't Fretters, my top tier supporters on Patreon, JJ Valdez, Laughing Cat Dog, and Peggy Lou Who. Thank you so much for your support. You are helping to ensure I'm able to create content and put it out as frequently as I possibly can. If you also want to help support the channel and gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. If not, no worries, that's fine, but please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I've said this for a couple of other books where I'm aware that the author has a fan base that isn't known for being super cool, chill, and friendly. I don't usually feel as though it's necessary, but for whatever reason, I just feel like maybe now's a good time to remind people my stance that reviews are for readers. They're not for the author, friends, or family of the author, or super fans of the author who go out of their way to harass and bully people who have anything to say about their favoriteest author in the whole world that isn't glazing. You know what I'm saying? This ain't no Krispy Kreme. There is no glazing here, okay? And also, some people really misconstrue critiquing a book as criticizing a person. This is just about the book. This isn't about Piper C.J. I'm not going to talk about any controversies she may or may not be the center of or wrapped up in. I haven't done an author's behaving badly type beat in a while because I just haven't felt I have anything to say about some of the things that I've seen on Threads, which is the only place where I see book community stuff anymore because I don't have Twitter and I deleted my TikTok. So anything I say about this book is not a personal attack on this person. I don't know them. And I feel as though people have already kind of commentated on the various controversies that this author's been a part of. And I know I get some hate watchers or whatever, which I really don't understand because it feels like such a weird use of your time. I talk this slow all the time. These can't be fun to watch if you're not trying to just have a voice in the background while you do your laundry, your meal prep, what did somebody else do their art homework? Why hate watch? Why consume content that just makes you mad? That's such a weird way to spend your time, bro. Go do something else. Go outside. Make a friend. I don't know, something. Play baseball. Call your dad. I don't know. Anyways, if you don't know this book, you never heard of it or whatever, don't worry. I'm going to read the premise for you real quick. Geralt of Rivia, a brooding professional monster for hire, also known as sorry, my bad. I looked up The Witcher by mistake. I don't know how anybody could make that mistake or get those confused. That's so silly of me. Hold on, let's try that again. Farley is just an orphanage. At least that's what the church would have the people believe. But beautiful orphans Nox and Fey-touched Amaris know better. They are commodities for sale, available for purchase by the highest bidder. So when the madame of a notorious brothel in a far-off city offers a king's ransom to purchase Amaris, Nox ends up taking her place, while Amaris is drawn away to the mountains, home of mysterious assassins. Even as they take up new lives and identities, Nox and Amaris never forget one thing. They will stop at nothing to reunite. But the threat of war looms overhead, and the two are inevitably swept in a conflict between human and fey, magic and mundane, with strange new alliances, untested powers, and a bond that neither time nor distance could possibly break. The fate of the realms lies in the hands of two orphans, and the love they hold for one another. I love that the premise says fate of the realms. That is just so funny. So I know it's been a minute since I've like been active on this channel or whatever. So just so anybody who's never seen me before or doesn't remember, I'm going to go through what happens in the book first, and then I'm going to do my analysis at the end. If you don't want any spoilers, but you want to know my final thoughts on the book, you can skip ahead to the time code in the link description below. Then the link description, it's not called a link description, it's just called a description. Sorry, I'm exhausted. There's a time code there if you want to skip that, whatever. Okay, intro. Nox hears a knock at the door of her orphanage, and she spies on the matron opening it. There's some rando who gives her a bundle. She's like, I don't do that anymore. He's like, you mean you didn't do this anymore? Very witty, incredibly witty, quick dialogue already happening here. It's a baby, and he's trying to sell it. Nobody's getting this pretty thing for a cent less than 50 crowns. So already the money system is anachronistic and not thought out. The baby is made of snow, not like literally, but she looks like the kind of gal who would find mayonnaise spicy. Chapter 1, there's a bit of a time skip, and they ditch chores to play in a pond. The orphanage bully tries to mess with them, and Nox debates killing him. Super weird how the only POC has impulsively violent tendencies and poor emotional regulation skills. Also, she's like a child. I'm a little iffy on that note. I think also like they're kids, but also like the author is trying to really set up that this is like one of those tough, super badass warrior type characters, or badass like morally gray YA fantasy characters, whatever. And so I don't think it's quite as racially charged as my note would make you think. I see where I'm coming from with that note, but I don't know if I stand by it. Chapter 2, the bishop makes his monthly visit to round up any magic kids. Nox has an inner monologue about tokenism. It's weird because 1, why is there racism / white supremacy in your fantasy world? And 2, why is isms a thing already? And there's going to be a lot more questions like that where I don't really have an answer. And part of it is like I don't really get a sense of what this world is supposed to be like, you know, like there's like horse-drawn carriages, but there's no like pistols or something like that. And less so about the isms, but more so like throughout the book, there are the same oppressive systems in this world as there are in ours. And it seems like for no real reason. It's just like maybe an opportunity for the author to give commentary on these things in our world or whatever. Some of the other details of this world make it not make a ton of sense as to why things are the way that they are, especially the religion that is not fleshed out or explained well at all. Maybe it will be in other books, and maybe I'll read those, depending on how this video goes. Chapter 3, Amaris, the honky, and Nox hide from the bishop, the bully and his friends. Weird how the bullies always have friends. Grab Amaris. The sugar sardine uses magic voice powers to make them leave her alone, but the pantry they were hiding in is super messed up. Nox hides Amaris and is whipped as punishment, but she disassociates from the pain, so it's fine. Weird how the religion has an all-mother, but it's still a patriarchal society. That's just me kind of repeating what I just said about chapter 2. And yeah, like I don't understand that at all. You know what I'm saying? Like the religion is surrounded around like a goddess, and only women can be like priests in their temples, and only women can go into the temples and stuff. And yet you see this man abusing his religious power over women. And it is super fucked up that the only character of color is the one getting whipped. That does come across as racially charged, and like I don't like that. Especially when it's to cover the unmelanated ass of this child who's like so pure white with silver hair and the daughter of the moon or whatever the fuck. I don't like that at all. Chapter 4 is just like a filler chapter. It's like talking about how there is a word for like the space between moments. The emptiness that exists betwixt things, but its name has been forgotten. That's the whole chapter. It's either super meta and clever, where it's like, yeah, there's this word that describes exactly what this chapter is, a space between things happening. I don't know what that word is, so f*** you. Or it's like really fucking dumb. And my inclination is for the latter. It almost feels like a joke that doesn't land. I can picture someone be like, oh, that's so clever. Oh, you got me. It's kind of like when we finally find out that the One Piece is the friends we made along the way. Chapters 5 to 9. It's market day, and a brothel owner spots Nox and Amaris, and the brothel owner puts down a deposit for Amaris. This scene was super fucked up, and they plan to run away. Chapter 10, a man with a lot of weapons shows up at the orphanage, and he's wounded, and he demands sanctuary. There's like a law in the religion that says like you got to give people sanctuary if they call on it or something. Chapter 11, the madam arrives for Amaris earlier than expected, so they gotta run. They try and rob the man with all the weapons and stuff. Amaris and Nox split up. The milk cricket stabs herself with a stolen dagger to make herself Sorry, there's a typo in my notes. So she like cuts herself up with a dagger like across her face and on her chest so that she is now marred because like her whole life the woman who ran the orphanage wouldn't even let her like get a scrape or whatever because they were scared of damaging her perfect white skin, which again makes me feel real fucking gross. It's gross. And I understand that like this is almost like a cultural thing where people talk about like whiteness being a representation of purity and innocence and all this stuff, and it's like the absence of color makes it good or whatever. But it feels really gross when you contrast that with this character who is like a woman of color who has to be subservient to this perfect moon child, whatever. She's getting whipped on this person's behalf. She's doing all the chores on this person's behalf. It points at some unchecked biases, and I don't want to point fingers or make wild accusations. If I could, I would recommend these two books to the author, maybe. So then Amaris makes a break for it, and she asks the man with the weapons to take her with him. He basically buys Amaris off of the nun and ditches Nox. Bad friend. Chapter 12, Amaris and Odrin the assassin travel to another town. Amaris asks Odrin to train her how to fight and like to protect herself or whatever for some odd reason. Like, I don't get why she has this burning desire seemingly out of nowhere. But whatever, it's fine. It's not fine, but I don't care enough to investigate it. And then he's like, girls don't train where I'm from. And she's like, well, that's sexist. And yeah, that definitely is, but it's like so weird. Isms and ideologies and oppressive systems still kind of like find their way into this society for like seemingly no reason. Chapter 13, Nox got caught trying to leave after she got ditched by old sour milk. Now she's going to go work at the brothel in the place of Ashy, but you can't see it. Chapter 14, Amaris and Odrin get to the base of the mountain where the Witchers, the Reavers live. Amaris says that they need to name Odrin's horse, and he chooses the name Cobb. Chapters 15 to 17, they make it to Reeve. The Reavers are mad that she's there, because, again, they're sexist. They have a meeting to discuss what to do with Amaris, and Amaris unknowingly uses her magic powers of persuasion to force them to let her stay and train. Sam, the leader, is Fae, and that power doesn't work on him, but he's like, I don't care, you can train here. Your power might be useful one day. He does an info dump on Amaris and the readers so we understand more of like what the Reavers do and the world. It is not an informative info dump, but it's an info dump nonetheless. And then Amaris befriends a half-fae named Ash. Chapters 18 to 19, training sucks. And there's a time skip, and now Amaris, the Ivory Child, is the bestest Reaver to ever reave. Chapters 20 to 22, Nox works in the brothel, the I forget what it's called, the Silky, I think. And she's trying to seduce a duke, and he orders 2 fingers of whiskey. What is this world? I don't know, man. It's like, I might touch on this a little bit, but it's almost as if this world is sort of built with like the assumption that you already know how all other copy and paste fantasy worlds work, and also is just kind of borrowing terms or like random mundane things from the modern world, the world that we live in, to fill in the gaps of stuff that the author didn't really want to take the time to build or think up. You know what I mean? Like, so a high fantasy book that I really enjoy is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. And like, he has taken the time to think about how like minutes, hours, days, weeks, months all kind of work. Like, he's come up with his own way of describing them, and it's a little roundabout, but it's because this is like a fantasy world where inventions or history is not the same. You know what I'm saying? And even like curse words, like instead of saying fuck, they say like sec. You know, they keep the drinks to something kind of medieval sounding, like I think it's ale or some kind of wine. I don't remember. It's been like probably a year since I read this, but I just feel like the world building as far as like fantasy, like really, how do you employ or how do you put in mundane elements of the fantasy world? I feel like this is a more thorough, thoughtful job than what I'm seeing in A Night and Its Moon. Okay, where were we? Okay, Amaris feeds on the Duke, and she's a succubus, not a vampire, but a succubus. There's a list of brain chemicals like oxytocin, serotonin, but it's a fantasy world without that science. I didn't even finish that note, but it's like, but it's a fantasy world without that science. I see what I did there. Whoops. And I stand by that. I just went over why I think that that's like sloppy. You know, instead of being like, I felt the effects of this thing, just describe the effects. You know, like people don't really like, yeah, adrenaline is easier to say than I felt the feelings you get when you have an adrenaline rush. If it's a world where that kind of like neurology hasn't been studied yet, then you kind of got to do something like that. You know what I'm saying? Because every time I would hear a word because every time I'd hear one of these words, I would just kind of get pulled out of it because I'd so like, yeah, when is this supposed to be based off of? What is the technology level of this world? What time period are we working with? I don't know. Why is there racism when there's only one person of color? Or why is it this kind of racism? Why is it a patriarchy when there's a queen in charge? The god is a goddess, and the religion is based off of a goddess, and there was some other thing I cannot for the life of me remember now, but I just don't get it. I'm so frustrated. Then there's a rushed backstory as to how we find out that Nox is a succubus. Chapters 23 to 25, Amaris is at the Reeve and dreams of Nox, and she gets her first mission to try and stop a war between the North and the South. She's teamed up with her friend Ash and a guy named Malik, and they travel together. They make camp, and Amaris hears something, or a lack of something, and spots two winged fae and tries to kill them. That doesn't work. One of them threatens her with a knife, and then her buddies attack the fae, and the fae fly away, and she's like, they were fae, and they're like, nah, those were demons, fool. Chapter 26 to 27, Nox is stringing a girl named Emily along. She and Emily knew each other from the orphanage. Emily got bought like slightly before Nox did. And then I have a note here that just says, this text needs the gender binary to survive. It's very heavy-handed on some like turf shit. Chapter 28, Amaris camps with her buddies and gets attacked by a Bazul. The Dark Fae save her, and her buddies try to save her from the Fae again. They think that the Fae are demons, and Amaris uses her magic on her buddies. And she'd been keeping that magic a secret at the command of Sam, the leader of the Reavers. Chapter 29, Ash and Malik go to a tavern. They're very upset after Amaris revealed her magic power. They feel lied to and shit, so they go to drink. And Nox is there for some reason, coincidentally. I don't know. Super convenient. And she tries to seduce Ash. Chapter 30, Amaris chats with the Dark Fae and then goes to the tavern, and her boys are being chased out. They go somewhere else, and they're still mad, so Amaris tries to Ash to say sorry. I guess that's how you handle apologizing in this world. And then Ash is like, why are you doing this? And she's like, so that you won't be mad at me, or so we can stay friends or whatever. And then they don't smash, but I still thought that was weird. Chapter 31, the Madam kills Emily, the girl who's in love with Nox, with a fucked up lizard hand. She has a fucked up lizard hand with claws, and it like drains the life force out of people or something. Chapters 32 to 34, Nox is still in the town where she met Ash, and she's spying on the Dark Fae. They mention Amaris, and she's like, that there's only one person. And like at first, they don't even say her name. They're just like, oh, you'll recognize her because she's like real pale and has silver hair, which I'm just realizing is like one of my least favorite YA fantasy tropes, to just have like a white-haired special. So they describe Amaris, and Nox is like, well, there's only one single person in the entire kingdom ever at all who could look like that. So she gets all excited. Then they're like, yeah, her name's Amaris. And then she freaks out. Then she faints, and she wakes up, and the madam shows up. The madam has this like magical teleporting carriage or something. Then she's like, I don't want to go back to the brothel because this lady will never let me out. So she like tries to escape, and then the madam knocks her unconscious with her scary lizard hand thing. Chapter 35, Amaris and company meet up with the Dark Fae, and she has to be like a translator because, I don't know if I explained this, but basically people, the Fae from the Northern Kingdom, if they enter the Southern Kingdom, they are perceived in every facet, every possible way as demons. And so Amaris can see through illusions, and so that she sees them as what they are, but everyone else sees them as demons and can't even hear their words. So she's like trying to translate for the two Reavers that she's with. The Fae reveal that they are on a mission by their king to find a son he thinks that he's had. They think that the son may be tied to their curse, and so if they find him, they'll be set free of the curse. Amaris is like, well, how do you know that it's a boy? And it's like very obvious that this heir that the king is looking for is Nox. They go to a temple of the goddess, and a priestess talks to Amaris, and nothing comes of that conversation. It's very confusing, cryptic, and unhelpful. Chapters 36 to 38, Nox is dying. The madam is freaking out, and then she gets a flashback about like being born with this amphibian hand that drains the life out of things. And in an effort to try and heal Nox, she gets a guy to essay her while she's incapacitated so that Nox will feed on him. And Nox is like, yo, it's weird I haven't seen Emily in a minute. I wonder what's up with her. Maybe she ran away. That's good. Now I don't have to break up with her ass because I know Amaris exists. It's over, which is really shitty. Chapter 39, Amaris and crew go to meet the queen. Chapter 40, Nox goes after the captain of the guard. She was no clout chaser is my least favorite anachronistic line so far. There's too many ongoing metaphors of hunters and prey and chess. I guess chess exists in this world, so then 6th century India exists or existed, and playing cards. So China around 1000 AD also existed, and since it's mostly poker imagery, 1803 Louisiana also exists. So anyways, turns out the captain is a serial killer, and Nox feeds on him. And if you found those notes confusing, that's fine. I found reading that part confusing because the author switches from metaphors of like hunter and prey and chess pieces and showing cards and folding and all this stuff. And I'm just like, pick one. I'm not going to say like never do multiple metaphors, but I think do them one at a time and make them make sense. Like it's I get that it's supposed to be like a game of cat and mouse and all that stuff, and it's strategizing around each other. It's very messy. And like a lot of the writing just feels very messy. Chapter 41, Amaris and crew meet the queen. And it turns out, one, she uses illusions and conjured a fake prince. And also is probably the one who cursed the Fae. I have no idea how Amaris just connects those dots and solves the mysteries so quickly, but she does. Probably because she's the special. And it writing a way to solve a crime or solve a mystery means that you'd have to be good at that kind of a thing. And two, Amaris's power doesn't work on the queen for whatever reason. And then somebody hits Amaris in the head with a sword, like pommel. Chapter 42, Nox brainwashed the captain, and Amaris wakes up in a dungeon. Chapter 43 is just reunited and it feels so good. And then Amaris is dragged into a coliseum to be executed. Chapter 44, Amaris is forced to, like, they try to force Amaris to fight the Dark Fae general, Gadriel. Chapter 45, Amaris refuses to do that, so the queen summons an Agdrath, which is a dragon. Chapter 46 to 47, Nox makes the captain sacrifice his life to try to free the Agdrath. It escapes, and so did they. Amaris and Gadriel are on the back of it. Amaris and the Reavers slip out, and they make a plan to try to kill the queen. In the epilogue, Amaris and Gadriel are on the back of the dragon, and they jump off when it flies down to eat a flock of sheep. I think Gadriel's dying or dead or something. A bunch of randos show up, and they're from the university. The end. Just really compelling, gripping, riveting stuff. Okay, so now we're moving on to my analysis. So this is the part of the video where I break down the book into 4 different aspects: characters, world building, plot, and writing. I just kind of talk about them. So starting with characters, both of these characters certainly develop throughout the book, but I don't think that they're well developed. Like, I don't know much about them or who they are as people beyond the fact that they are like 2 different versions of the girl who isn't like other girls. If anything, they're like the opposite ends of the spectrum of girl who isn't like other girls' characters. You know what I'm saying? And this could be a really good opportunity to have a discussion or to make commentary on what it's like to be a woman in a patriarchal society. And I think maybe an attempt was made, but I don't think that it says much of anything. So like, if there's commentary, and honestly that's a big if there's commentary, it's about as shallow and pedantic as Katy Perry's latest album. I don't really buy the romance between Nox and Amaris. Like, it just kind of seems like they love each other because that's the point of the story, but there's no like tender moments. Like, there aren't a lot of sweet moments when they're kids, really. We don't spend a lot of time with them together as kids, and in story they're around each other for like 10 minutes maybe, but they're like, I love you so much, and I'm like, I don't get why, other than it's like destiny, or just because like it needs to be a romance because that's what sells or something. Power imbalance, the privilege imbalance, the racial dynamic, all that shit makes this romance feel really gross to me. The fact that Amaris was like cherished beyond all reason because she's pure white with silver hair and beautiful lavender eyes, and then Nox is kind of put in this more subservient, overly sexualized position as like the only woman of color in the entire book. It just feels really gross. That whipping shit wasn't cool, and I don't get what there is to love about Amaris because she's just kind of there. Also, the fact that Nox kind of low-key raises Amaris makes this feel like saying it's giving groomer feels really heavy-handed because it's like a 3-year age difference or whatever, but it feels weird nonetheless. I don't know why, it just feels weird. Neither one of these characters is like particularly compelling or likable, and all the other characters, like I said, like these 2 characters, because those are the ones that are characterized, every other character is incidental, unimportant, and just there to move the story forward. Even when we get chapters from other characters' POVs, like Ash, Emily, whatever the madam's name is, like, all of that's just to move the plot forward because the main characters are busy for a second and they need a break. You know, it's hard to be the center of a book. Also, some of the chapters, like the madam's flashback, just feels like filler. Emily's POV just feels like we're doing that to get to a certain word count. I don't know if the author gets paid by the word or something, but yeah, that's how that felt. Felt super unnecessary. Moving on to world building, I can't imagine recommending this book as like someone's first fantasy. I'm sure that it is somebody's first fantasy book, or it's somebody's like introduction to fantasy, something like that, but it just feels like a bad choice because this book desperately needs you to have read other fantasy things to get what's going on. You know, it presumes that you know fantasy, and it presumes that you don't mind. It feels like the author kind of fills in the blanks of stuff that she didn't want to explain or didn't want to write with just terms and things from real life, instead of finding a way to explain it within fantasy. Like, okay, I never thought I'd do this. Credit where credit's due. At least assistant to the villain found a way to explain donuts. And I hated that. I hated doing that. That hurt my soul. Okay? And the patriarchy and the sexism and the rampant misogyny in assistant to the villain makes way more sense because the king is a king. Like, because it's a kingdom. It's a very, like, patriarchal capitalist type society. And I'm not saying that assistant to the villain is like better than A Night in Its Moon. It might be, but I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, like, at least the author of that book, whether it was for the joke or just because they felt like that was like good world building, took the time to fill in the blanks. As it said to herself, like, oh, if I'm going to have like coffee in this world, how am I going to explain it in a fantastical way? It could have been as simple as like, so-and-so found this plant that produces beans and, you know, after trial and error, figured out how to make this really energizing tea out of it. And we call it something else because it's not quite tea. That would have been fine too, but whatever. Cauldron brew is fine too. It's not. I hate it, but it's better than just being like, this is a fantasy world with no technology, but also we know what oxytocin is. And because of shit like that, I'm actually not clear on what the world looks like. What is the technology level? What, you know, like, are pistols a thing? Because horses and carriages are, and you would think, like, because this is so overwritten and there's so much pretty purple prose, I'd have no problem. You know, like, the author's trying to paint a picture with words, but the picture is unclear. It's muddy and it's confusing. And I think that's due in part to the anachronistic writing. I don't really get a sense of the size of the scope of the geography of this world either. That's with a lot of these romantasy type books. Like, it's all about the whatever aspect the author was most excited about, and everything else falls to the wayside and is of no importance or low priority. And I just think that makes for like a story that's not fleshed out or well-rounded at all. The magic system is not interesting or well thought out or of any consequence. Like, if some point, if like Nox, you know, just got fangs and grew wings, I'd have to be like, okay, guess you can do that now, because none of it's really explained. And maybe that's because this is 100% like 500 pages of setup for the next thing. And I think the thing with magic, even if you're not going to fully explain it in the first book, I think that some explanations as to how it works that isn't just hand wavy or whatever would be something, even if it's a soft magic system. Like, I've said this before in other videos, I stand by it. I feel like if you're going to write fantasy, strongly recommend watching or reading Hunter x Hunter or Full Metal Alchemist, because, you know, I think Hunter x Hunter is a really good example of like a hard magic system with a lot of rules and what happens if you break those rules or why you can't break those rules or whatever. Full Metal Alchemist is kind of a softer magic system that acts like a hard magic system, but it's still, I don't know, it's something. And also the world building, not just the magic system, but the world building, the politics and stuff, I think is really good. You know, if you watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, that first episode is so, it throws you right into the middle of things, and it can be a little whelming, you can get a little lost, but I still think it's good. Moving on to plot, most of this book is like set up, and then a bunch of shit happens near the end, which I think is kind of common for a lot of fantasy, where they spend a lot of time just like kind of luxuriating over like overly descriptive writing and romantic tension and, you know, patriarchal beauty standards in fantasy books and all this stuff. And then like, oh yeah, I guess I need a compelling plot line. I got like 5 chapters left. We can do this. But because I don't find either of these characters compelling or likable, I'm not gripped or compelled by the story. The events aren't, well, they aren't. There aren't events. You know what I'm saying? It's not an eventful book. And then same thing with like the world building, it being so copy and paste and sloppy. This isn't like a world I want to be in. So I'm not really compelled by anything that's happening in this story. Moving on to writing. This is like if Stephanie Garber peppered in like some black slang or something. It's overly written with pretty purple prose nonsense. And then also like clout chaser, but also betwixt, but also oxytocin. And I'm just, what the f*** is this? The anachronistic writing gives the impression that the narrator is not from the world this story is taking place in, but is like from real life, just telling you what happened. It's almost like you're getting a fantasy story told to you by that guy from the Ant-Man movies, Lewis. It's not nearly as jarring as some of the other books I've reviewed more recently, but this is the literary equivalent of a yapper. And that's coming from somebody fluent in Japanese. I didn't enjoy this book like at all. The characters are hollow, empty shells, embodiments of tropes, and that's kind of it. Plot is nothing. Whatever is a semblance of plot just feels like it reminds me of other things that I've watched on Netflix or read in other books or whatever. The world is very copy and paste. Like, I've seen like 3 isekai anime that have the same world. You know what I'm saying? And those were actually better written. Like, the time I got reincarnated as a slime is way more interesting, like, world building than this. And that's called The Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. I think I'd give this book, like, I don't know, 1.25 stars at most. I don't know if I'll continue with this series. I think it's really going to depend on how this video goes for me. Because, like, the channel's kind of dying because I took 2 weeks off. So we'll see what happens, I guess. Anyways, that's enough out of me. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you to my super duper don't fretters, Lauren, Desi, Shade, Cassie, and Oliver. Thank you so much for your support. You are helping to ensure I'm able to create content and put it out as frequently as possible. If you also want to help support this channel and gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. 45 minutes of extra content every month. This month has been a particularly bad month for me, like, mental health wise, so it's probably gonna be like kind of split over the next couple months. Sorry about that. But you also get access to my exclusive Discord server where you can chat with me and all the other really awesome club members. We do a monthly book club as well, so we read a book, talk about it on a live stream, on a Zoom. And yeah, if any of that sounds interesting or exciting to you, make sure you consider subscribing on Patreon. If not, no worries, but please, before you go, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Thank you again so much for watching. My name is D. Don't fret. I'll see you next time. Peace out.